Hi, folks. Welcome to Hat Friday without hats. We both, I think we both got bored with it. Today, John Swinney took the press conference today. We'll have a quick chat about that. We're going to mention Mr. Corbyn, and we're going to mention the miraculous new poll on Scottish independence. Or, well, is it Scottish independence or is it? I don't know. We'll have a chat about it and try and sort out what it's really about.
I think the impact on Plan B is possibly worth mentioning, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, the presser. Did anything at all interest you in any way whatsoever?
The fact that it was Friday, therefore the weekend, and it was quite short, and it was quite clear that some of the junior reporters had turned up rather than the senior ones. This seems to happen. I don't know why it's not Friday. The boss doesn't get the. Anyway, I'll leave you to speculate. We also had a deputy first minister answering the questions for the first time ever. I think I've never seen him.
I think he might have done it once before.
I'm not quite sure whether it was because it was a Friday. Or because of the topic, he wanted to announce something to do with face coverings in schools.
Yeah, I think that's the main driver. And I do think, I have to say, not so much this week, I must admit, but last week, Nicola was looking a bit frayed at the edges. I think she could do with a long break, which she's not going to get during the pandemic, is she?
Apparently she said herself she's not had a holiday either, has she?
No, she hasn't, unlike Boris. Who was camping in somebody's field.
He's not well.
Who, Boris? What's wrong with him? The standout for me was the Sun. Now, as it happens, the Sun mentioned somebody we know, Tom Kitchen, who has a restaurant in Leith, huge supporter of the Citadel, the local youth club, well thought of. But apparently Tom Kitchen thought it was a bit much not to be able to have a glass of wine with your meal. But the way the Sun reporter put it was basically, posh restaurants, should they get to serve drink when everybody else doesn't?
What was the actual expression? High
end, was it?
High-end restaurants. He was trying to come up with a definition of expensive restaurants.
Well, he didn't want to use the word posh.
The first thing I wondered was, how can you afford to go to a restaurant like that if you're a junior reporter?
Well, I have to tell you, Tom Kitchen does a very good, it's not cheap, 35 quid, but a set lunch. If anybody wants to try out his restaurant.
Well, I shouldn't have asked a stupid question either, because I know how you get to afford a very expensive restaurant, because you agreed to write a nice article about it.
Well, so the Sun is no longer the paper of the people. It's the paper of the people that couldn't afford to eat in Michelin-starred restaurants. But that was followed by the Herald. Question, staying on the bevy, maybe it's because it's Friday, asking John Swinney if a packet of crisps constituted a meal. Could you drink before the meal? Could you drink during the meal? Could you drink after the meal? All looking for a headline along the lines of Sturgeon says you can't ever bevy.
I mean, it really was. I've been rude and I've written. I thought it had written Walker, but it's something that looks spelled very much like Walker. He asked a stupid question. We actually got an informative answer in the sense that what we discovered was one of the reasons that cinemas are a bit restricted is the ventilation. I suppose some of the newer ones you wouldn't have that problem, but all the soft surfaces they cannot be cleaned satisfactorily.
Yeah, and which brings me back to my point about care homes again. There wasn't much. There wasn't a lot of new information apart from the face coverings now for kids in classrooms. Well, senior kids anyway.
We finished up with a question about the possibility of immunity in Inverclyde. Inverclyde being the only, what's the word, local authority area in Greater Glasgow and Clyde Health Board area that has not got a very high infection rate. And the suggestion was they had a bad first phase of the virus. And the suggestion was, did that mean they'd got a bit more immunity the second time round? And Jason Leitch, who was there, says, well, they can't prove that at all at the moment. But I did expect, you know, there could be some immunity from high prevalence earlier, was kind of what he said.
Yeah, he mentioned London and Spain.
Yeah, well, when he mentioned Spain, he was expecting a question about Spain. So there's a question about Spanish mutation. But the interesting thing that I read about the Spanish mutation was that because it had mutated, they could prove where people had picked up the virus from. And the main driver of the second wave, apparently in Europe, is people coming back from Spain. So I'm going to state categorically the selfish bastards that went on Spanish holidays reinfected Britain.
Well, one person possibly.
Well,
that's the problem here, Stuart.
One super spreader.
Well, if one person came back and gave it to everybody in the airport and everybody then went home, you know, you can't necessarily say they caught it in Spain. You can only say they caught that strain of the virus somewhere.
Yes, I mean, that's true.
But I'm not in the least bit surprised it didn't come up, because that would have done two things that the press don't want. That would have proven that the idea of a mutation can prove that the virus originated elsewhere, not allowing you to criticize the Scottish government, who would therefore not be responsible. And it would prove that going on holiday is a bad idea. Once again, not allowing you to criticize the Scottish government for telling you not to go on holiday.
You've got to bear in mind that right from the very start, I say the very start because I've got other information I need to share with you, but there supposedly was an outbreak in Edinburgh in February because there was a Nike, the sports wear company, had a conference in a hotel in Edinburgh, and it became a big issue for the gutter press here in Scotland. And they were able to prove that the Scottish, using genome testing or something, that they hadn't acted, that this conference, the version of the virus that was at that conference wasn't spread around Britain.
Which was just ignored by the press. I mean, I remember when she actually mentioned it, this genome testing, and I thought, this is the Nike conference. They've got good news. This didn't spread to Fife. And about 2 weeks later, that's exactly what came out and was totally ignored by the press. The press don't want to know that it's not an SNP bad story. Anything that basically proves the actions taken were the right actions will be ignored. It's just bad news they want. And especially, what's his name, Ian, the Labour MP.
Ian Murray.
Made a huge stushy about it and never apologised for getting it wrong. I mean, he'd more or less accused the Scottish government of being responsible for the whole pandemic due to the Nike conference, over which they had no say nor control, as it happens. Yeah. But he made a massive and headlined everywhere for 2 or 3 days, and on the BBC nationwide, UK-wide, not just nationwide. And then when it turned out to be a load of cobblers, he wasn't seen to apologise. So,
is there any chance that Ian Murray is Ian Davidson's son? Because they seem to be an awful resemblance.
No, they're basically old school Labour. That's
why they look the same and sound the same.
Which brings us neatly to the nationwide headlines today. Jeremy Corbyn, recent leader of the Labour Party, is no longer in the Labour Party.
Yes, it's been a trying time for the Labour Party. Did we not cover this at all yesterday?
No, because it didn't happen.
I
Didn't
must
happen
have
till
discussed
late.
it with quite a few people. It would appear to me that the Labour Party have shot themselves in the foot again. It's not as though we have a powerful opposition in this country and the government has a very narrow majority in the House of Commons and therefore they can be easily held to account for their actions. Oh no, they've got 4.5, well, yeah, nearly just over 4 years with an 80-seat majority. And we could do with a strong opposition. Unfortunately, the opposition, they might as well be a butterfly, you know. We've now got another chasm of divide inside the Labour Party because of the actions of Keir Starmer yesterday.
Well,
Right?
I've said it
Defending
before, and
Jeremy Corbyn.
said it before, and I'll say it again. This has been the most successful smear of the Labour Party ever. This anti-Semitic thing, and there were people within the Labour Party responsible for smearing Corbyn with it, and it will not go away. It doesn't matter what they do. This will come up again and again and again. And those in the Labour Party that weren't prepared to defend somebody whose whole life has been to fight against racism, anti-Semitism, if they weren't prepared to defend him simply because they disagreed with his particular colour of Labour politics, they'll live to regret it. Stammers will not stamp it out with this.
It's interesting that you and I both read this article in to me, an obscure publication, a very important article though, defending Jeremy Corbyn, Middle East Eye. Not the most obvious place to read an article by Peter O'Born, which was...
And somebody else, somebody had a co-writer.
Yes, but Peter O'Born is a kind of... The other writer had formerly worked for the Daily Telegraph. Peter O'Born formerly worked for the Daily Telegraph. So they're not people you'd expected to be defending Jeremy Corbyn, but they are.
Well, I think that defending his right to say that he disagrees with this report. And it's well worth a read.
I'm not going to read the report. It's 800 pages long.
No. I'm talking about the article. Yes. I've skimmed the report. I haven't gone into it in depth. I think I might just do that.
Are you going to fall asleep?
Well,
you'll fall asleep before you get to the end of 800 pages.
Well, the article points up areas that need to be examined. I watched Newsnight last night, and Kirsty Wark was not happy because there was a young Jewish Labour guy on there who was complaining that this Corbyn episode, this present one, was basically shielding real anti-Semitism and the fight against anti-Semitism. And he got very heated, and Kirsty was not happy because he would not go with her line that what they wanted to talk about was the damage to the Labour Party. Will there be a schism between Corbynites and Stammerites? Stammerites, that sounds like it should be in a cave. Will it cause a schism?
Well, I think it will.
I don't.
A big mistake.
I'm not sure it will. I'm not sure it will at all. But talk about picking a man when he's down.
Right. Well, can I make the case, summarize the case for this article? This article compares Neil Kinnock's attitude to militant and Tony Blair's attitude to the Clause 4 part of the Labour Party constitution. I know you're going to have to be a bit of a geek to know what I'm talking about here. But basically, it was to move the Labour Party very much to the centre ground, or to and rename it New Labour. And what happened yesterday was supposedly Keir Starmer's equivalent.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't quite see it that way. Militant was a party within a party. That was not Jeremy Corbyn. Jeremy Corbyn was the leader of the Labour Party. I mean, he was mainstream.
He was voted by the members. He was incredibly popular with the members. He went to Glastonbury Festival and they sang his name.
Well, he was no Hatton, put it that way. He was your top of the pinnacle man in Labour. What was the other one you mentioned? Oh, the Clause 4.
Yeah, Tony Blair and Clause 4. Wait a minute. Well, anyway, it was Tony Blair invented New Labour. And guess who? Didn't Maggie Thatcher describe Tony Blair's New Labour as her legacy?
Yeah. And if you're a member of the Labour Party and you are left, if you're a socialist, let's put it that way.
Even a social democrat, to be honest.
Your job in the Labour Party seems to be to become a sacrificial lamb to make whoever is in charge of the Labour Party look like a Tory so they can get in power. That I would worry about. I don't actually.
You've only just started worrying about that.
No, but if Peter Oborne's historical progression, is correct, and the way to become, he doesn't actually agree with that, does he? But there are several people who are saying that essentially the way to get on to become popular as a Labour leader is to sacrifice people on the left of the party.
Yes. Did you see this Steve Bell cartoon?
I did.
Now, we don't even need to show it. It's simply a silver platter. Keir Starmer's holding it, and it's got Jeremy Corbyn's head on it. You don't even need to see it to understand it.
But of course, if you want to see it, we can probably do that for you. I just feel the whole thing's.
All right, just move to one side, the other way.
Which way? T'other way.
Other way. There it is.
There you
Jeremy
go, folks.
Corbyn's head on the platter. Now,
that sums it up. I mean, that's the way I feel about it.
Sacrificial lamb, right enough, eh?
And
cooked.
I suppose the kindest thing I could say about it is to say that the elites have succeeded. And that I would include Keir Starmer's amongst. This is not a victory for the working class of the UK.
It's not a victory for democracy.
Well, what this says is, if you are of the left, you do not get near power. That's what it says to me.
Well, the other day I reposted an old cartoon of a 4-picture cartoon with a picture of a guy in a bed with a Palestinian flag and a dog on the rug beside them. Second picture has the dog on the bed. This is the Israeli flag dog on the bed beside the Palestinian. The third one has the Israeli dog sprawled all over the bed and the Palestinian still in it. But the fourth one has the dog in the bed and the Palestinian lying on the rug.
And that
I get done for anti-Semitism for
that. The kind of bottom line of this is, it will be interesting to see what Starmer's stance is on Palestine the first time he gets asked about the first Israeli atrocity.
But would you say I'm anti-Semitic?
No,
I'm certainly not. It's from my point of view, and I don't think
what gets me about it, we asked Jimmy yesterday if he knew anybody that could be tagged anti-Semitic in all his time and dealings with the Labour Party. I can think of nobody I have ever met who's a Labour member who was in any way anti-Semitic. Plenty of them are pro-Palestine, but that seems to be what this is about.
This seems to be what it's about. Yes, this seems to be what it's about. Some people with power they've been doing it for years, equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism, and they're two very different things. Zionism is, in its modern form, is the establishment of the state of Israel on the land of the Palestinians.
Well, who would go to a pro-Palestine rally if they were a member of the Labour Party now. This, to me, smacks of engendering fear.
And how does that relate to Scottish politics? Scottish politics, which is on the west of Scotland, is a bit complicated, and to some extent, Rangers supporters are unionists and Celtic supporters are, well, it used to be Labour, but Rangers supporters fly Israeli flags and Celtic supporters fly as Palestinian flags. What's going on?
I mean, anybody I know that's been active in pro-Palestinian politics has been Labour, and I'd be interested to see how that shakes out now. Will people be scared to support the position of the Palestinians for fear of being tarred with an anti-Semitic brush, or a brush that makes them look anti-Semitic? Can you get an anti-Semitic brush? Anyway, that's for the future. But good news today that
Another poll.
Yeah, that you found.
Yes, another poll.
56 in favour of Scottish independence, 44 against.
It's even better than that, because I went to find exactly what the question was, because the 58% the other day question was using the same questions as we were asked at the referendum in 2014. Let me just bring this one up. Charlie Cooper, some guys. This poll was produced by JL Partners, which has been set up by some guy called James Johnson and Charlie Cooper, who did the polling for Theresa May's Tory party.
Was he not an advisor to Theresa May, one of them?
Well, probably a spad. So this poll, he specialized in focus groups. And he starts off his article by saying he'd spent a couple of days, this is how well educated he is about Scotland. Spent a couple of days in Scotland doing focus groups during the 2014 referendum. Well done, young man. I'm sure you're really well up to speed on what's happening here. But what was interesting is that I haven't actually read the questions, but what he did say here, right at the very first line, Boris Johnson leadership is the biggest factor driving swing voters in Scotland towards backing independence. So this 56% is 56% of swing voters are prepared to vote for Scottish independence. So that's not counting all the existing, not the swing. What about all the people who have already made up in their minds to vote for independence?
Well, the other interesting thing about it was, well, the Sturgeon v. Johnson, and he uses the word loathed, that Johnson is loathed in Scotland, which is fairly strong. But the chasm between them in popularity is huge. But then they talk about the Scottish NHS, and that's hugely supported. Well, the Scottish government's treatment of the NHS in Scotland, hugely supported. Economy, she gets a plus in the economy as well. But the article really is about what do unionists do
to fight back,
to hold back the waves, to hold back the tide.
So at point one, avoid the emotional case for the United Kingdom. They discovered, my goodness, they needed a poll to find that Scottish people feel Scottish, not British, and no polished video is going to persuade them otherwise.
And at the moment, Gove is busy putting his hit team together, which is exactly what he shouldn't do, according to this.
Yeah. Second point, focus on the economy, but replace Project Fear with Project Unknown. Now, I would say, yes, focus on the economy. To some voters, it is the weak thing. He claims here, now this could be true. It says the primary hesitation that swing voters have about voting, yes, and they feel they will be better off under the union. Now,
but the argument
that falls
the
down
same.
now. Look at it. You're looking at the way the economy has been run from London now. Where's the risk now? Not into the unknown. It's staying with this lot.
So that's advice to be taken on board by the Yes campaign as well.
And 3, Labour must take a leading role. Now, this is face spam for me. There's an acceptance of Labour figures north of the border, especially among
But look who he names: Gordon Brown and Darling.
But he could be right, because he's focused. This is not the whole population. This is just undecided. This is undecided voters. Bear in mind that's slightly different from swing voters. They're divided into 2 groups. The Labour Party itself, former Prime Minister Gordon Brown, current Labour Party leader Keir Starmer, and former Chancellor Alice Darling all rate positively.
Well, and his Tory leaders of the campaign,
Rishi Sunak and Ruthie
and Baroness Davidson.
We suspect that she's been polished up, because yesterday we Jimmy and I certainly agreed, and I think you probably would agree as well, that she is less aggressive, less hectoring lately in her
She's
leadership.
going to be a baroness.
So she's going to be
that speech she made to Tory conference, where she called us all, what were we? Were feckless and thieves. Effectively, I think it was our first Tory conferences. I'm not even sure she was party leader at the time, but
they managed to eliminate that from the internet yet.
Well, they might have got it off the internet, but I've got it. So I'm just going to put that on a loop.
Well, it's worse than that. This fella here says, number 10 should lock away Boris, make this the Rishi and Ruth show, alongside current Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross, to boost his profile. Well, I suspect that's what they're up to, because they've had him on BBC in Scotland every bloody day lately.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking the other day, the balance of the BBC is now opposition parties get to talk politics, SNP get to talk COVID. And they look at the clock and say, right, the SNP have had 10 minutes, we better give the opposition party 10 minutes. But it's not 10 minutes of politics for the SNP.
No.
It's 10 minutes of COVID.
Well,
which may be a good thing without them realizing they're benefiting the SNP.
But anyway, we come to the final point, which is the controversial one, because we have one more person to bring into this discussion here. So he says here, delay a referendum, but do not refuse it. To timetable a referendum until Brexit is less of a pressing issue, when Sturgeon's popularity is no longer at an all-time high, and when there may even be someone else in Downing Street. It's probably the Union's best chance of winning a future. Now, that's could be right. Could be right.
I think if I were a unionist, that I would be looking to stretch out time.
Exactly.
But I'm not sure. I wouldn't be sure it would work.
The trouble is, Stuart Campbell over at Wings Over Scotland has picked up on that, and you add that to the announcement this morning, that there will be no discussion of a Plan B at the SNP conference. That's not going to be on the agenda.
Bad mistake.
Bad mistake. And if you add that to what we've just said, that delay is what they will. The Tories, their best move is to delay another referendum. There's going to be a big row, a huge row.
Well, that is really their only option. If they have a quick referendum, I'm pretty sure we'd win it. If they have a 2-year referendum, I think we would win it. If they have a 5-year referendum, things will have changed. Brexit will be settling in. We'll be getting used to being poor. They'll be able to make arguments about, we're all in this together, or you'll get poorer than you are now. I mean, that extending it is about the only way. So I expect his next answer won't be no. His next answer will be now is not the time, but we'll start talking about when you can have it.
And can I just
that could diffuse things.
Can I read out just two? I haven't drilled down into the detail of this poll yet because I was preparing for this show. There's two very interesting questions asked in this poll. Arguments about independence dominate everything, and becoming independent would allow Scotland to finally end the debate. Now, who did they ask? Excluding don't knows. So presumably, I've got to find out if it was just their swing voters or everybody. But anyway, the answer is agree, 65%. People want that suggests people want independence so they can get on with their lives.
They're prepared.
Agree.
If it's swing voters, it means they're prepared to accept independence just to stop talking about it.
And right, the issue of independence is divisive, and becoming independent would allow us to finally end the division and move on. 59% agree.
Well,
so we need to move now.
I agree with you. Strangely enough.
That's very strange.
I don't agree that the gradualists weren't right, but now is not the time to be a gradualist. Now we've got 58% of people want independence, and now we need to go.
I'll even quote you, Wings. It's this site's view. This is Wings, piece 2 Campbell. It's this site's view that a plebiscitary election next May, that means bringing in the referendum as part of the question or the campaign for next May's election, would beyond a reasonable doubt produce a clear and healthy majority for independence in a manner which would be accepted by the international community.
Yeah, but I don't know. The SNP are, I'm now at the point where I'm seriously considering voting for somebody else. Unfortunately, there's nobody else to vote for.
Did you notice? It wasn't quite clear why. Someone posted a picture of Kenny McCaskill, the MP, yesterday.
Yeah.
And claimed there was a quote that he was supporting alternative voting on a list party.
Independence for Scotland party.
ISP party.
Aye.
It didn't. There was no 100% that he said it, but I haven't seen it refuted yet.
I hope he hasn't. We don't need that. I think we'll call it a day at that. I've got a wee clip, seeing as we don't have Jimmy with us.
Can I mention a Jimmy quote before you play the clip? Jimmy told us yesterday, but it wasn't very clear in the audio, that we know him as a taxi driver, but he says all he does is drive around in a transit with a sofa in the back.
That's not accurate, but he's not happy at the moment. And seeing as we do not have Jimmy with us today, we've got a Jimmy clone from Glasgow.
Okay, I'm going to say my bye-byes.
That I'm going to play out with a clip of. So thanks for being with us, Stuart.
Bye-bye.
And I'm Norry Stewart. Thanks for listening and watching, folks. Oh, I've got one other shout out to give. Colin in Zambia. Phil Attridge, who is a friend of the show, has an ex-brother-in-law out in Zambia called Colin, who listens to the show every day. So hi, Colin. Hope you're enjoying the show.
All right. We should be giving good shouts to all our regulars, shouldn't we? Like Angela and Nina and James and things.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. It makes it all worthwhile. Here's a clip of another taxi driver on the other side of the country. Cheers for now, folks. Oh, here we go. Jimmy the clone, or clone Jimmy, or whatever.
Great before the lockdown, but now it's so bleak. It's actually quite frightening. It's horrible, actually. Yeah, the future looks very bleak. My name's Aaron Crow, and I've been a Glasgow taxi driver for nigh on 40 years. Once the children are in the school from about 9 o'clock, 8:45, from then to the kids come out, there's virtually nothing. And it's not unheard of. A lot of the drivers be doing nothing between 9, 8:45 and 3 o'clock for the schools coming out again. And again, that's another hour with a bit of work, and then it dies again. And the night shift now with all the bars and nightclubs and restaurants and everything, there's just no night shift. There's no and all those guys that were driving then are all leaving. They're going to all get into working supermarkets, delivery, courier drivers, delivery drivers, and unless there's money put in and support and some kind of grant or some kind of support, I believe that the taxi could be the end of the taxi trade in Glasgow.
So if all the taxi drivers in Glasgow give up, Jimmy will move to Glasgow and be the only taxi driver in Glasgow. Anyway, folks, cheers for now. Thanks for listening.